Hello, thank you everyone.
Hello, thank you everyone.
We will be starting and please put your questions in the chat
have them
during
have
this time
them
if you're
during
pressed.
this time if you're pressed.
And if you like to use there is a CC
button at the bottom of your screen.
Turn that on and you'll be able to see
captions across the bottom
captions
of the
across
screen.
the bottom of the screen.
Thank you.
Hello, everyone. Welcome to the Janae Wagner Theater at the Rose Wagner Performing Arts Center. My name is Matt Castillo, and I'm the director of the Salt Lake County Division of Arts and Culture. We provide support to the arts and culture community across the county, including operating this venue, as well as Abravanel Hall, Capitol Theater, Eccles Theater, the soon-to-be-completed Mid-Valley Performing Arts Center, the Visual Arts Building, home of the Utah Museum of Contemporary Art, as well as the ticketing service ArtTix. We are here today to release the results of a survey measuring audience sentiment and intent to return to arts and entertainment, conducted by Y2 Analytics during March of 2021. This survey was commissioned by the Utah Department of Heritage and Arts, Salt Lake County Arts and Culture, and the Utah Cultural Alliance. Kyrene Gibb from Y2 Analytics will share the methodology and demographics of the survey, review the pre-COVID economic impact of this industry, discuss the impact of the pandemic on spending and behavior, and finally share anticipated behaviors of consumers in the next 6 months. Following Kyrene, I will comment on behalf of Salt Lake County Arts and Culture, then Crystal Young-Otterstrom from the Utah Cultural Alliance, followed by Vicki Borns from the Utah Division of Arts and Museums, representing the Utah Department of Heritage and Arts. I now turn the podium over to Kyrene Gibb from Y2 Analytics to share the results of the survey.
Well, thank you, Matt, and thank you all for your time this morning. We're excited to go over some of the results of the survey we conducted on behalf of this coalition of cultural and performing arts groups throughout the state of Utah and this vital sector of the Utah economy. As Matt mentioned, the survey was in the field in March of this year, so we were fielding from the 3rd to the 22nd. We gathered 1,104 responses from registered voters statewide. We're roughly approximating statewide registered voter population demographic statistics in regards to age, gender, county of residence, and ethnicity as well. So roughly approximating means we have about 1 in 5 of our respondents who is under age 35, about 18% each in the 35 to 44, 45 to 54, 55 to 64, and 65 and older category is about 28% of our respondents. So 1,104 respondents results in a margin of error of about 3 percentage points in either direction around all of the estimates that we'll talk about for the statewide results. And we also gathered an oversample of respondents in the Salt Lake County registered voter population, and that total was 649 voters. So the margin of error there is closer to about 4 percentage points where we're looking at those county totals. There will be a few comparisons in the slides you'll see today. Starting with a few key findings or high-level takeaways from the survey data, it's notable that For some sectors of the economy, registered voters feel that things are a little bit back to normal or business as usual. In particular, when we're talking about visiting restaurants or shopping at a big box retailer or local business, we find that most voters are currently comfortable and frequently participating in these activities. When it comes to entertainment and cultural venues, however, there's a little bit more hesitation. We find that a majority of voters are comfortable visiting those venues, but not quite as comfortable engaging in some of these other activities. Among those voters who currently say that they would not be comfortable visiting a live entertainment or cultural venue, we find that a majority expect to feel comfortable returning to this sector of the Utah economy within the next 6 months. Second, we asked voters about a variety of live entertainment and cultural activities, and across all of these activities, we find that about 1 in 5 to 1 in 3 residents say that they would be willing to spend more, and they expect that they'll spend more on these activities post-COVID than they did compared to prior to the pandemic. So I think that expresses some sentiments around pent-up desire. Certainly this is something that's been missing from voters' lives when we're thinking about the Utah economy and the level of impact there. Third, under current conditions, nearly half of voters say that they would be open to participating in outdoor events. So plays, concerts, performances, things where there's a little bit of room to breathe, those are the things that voters are currently most comfortable engaging in the live entertainment and cultural sector. Fourth, when we think about the types of precautions that venues can take to reassure voters and audience members that it's safe and they would be comfortable, masks and sanitization of high-touch surfaces are the things that are widely considered the most important things that can be done. And then there are some environmental factors that play a role as well, namely widespread vaccination and personal vaccination. And the last key finding here, it's worth noting that we find a majority of Utah voters statewide and a plurality of those in Salt Lake County specifically say that they would not attend an event if a COVID test were required as part of admission. So there are some limits to the lengths that voters are willing to go, and those sentiments are really colored by whether voters are most concerned about the economic or public health impacts of the coronavirus. So before we get into the survey data, I do want to talk a little bit about some data that was gathered in 2018 about the economic impact of the arts and culture industry on the state of Utah. Overall, just looking at a summary of those numbers, we find that 155,551 Utahns were employed by the arts and cultural sector. It generated about $4.8 billion in earnings for the state economy, generated about $264.3 million in nonprofit revenue, and about $15.2 billion in gross sales. In total, this represents about $7.2 billion, or about 4.3% of Utah's economic earnings. And it exhibited about 4% growth in 2018, which is the most recent year that this data is all available. So certainly a significant contributor to the Utah economy. Thinking specifically about some of the activities that voters have participated in most frequently in the past, again, this is pre-pandemic, we find that a majority of Utahns report frequently, or often or sometimes, attending festivals, cultural events, or parades, visiting zoos, botanical gardens, or aquariums, attending fireworks shows, visiting arts and museums or art galleries, attending plays or other live theater performances, and attending live sporting events, or attending conventions or conferences. All of these things have a majority share of voters saying that they're participating in those activities frequently under normal conditions. After that, slightly more niche audiences for some of these other live entertainment and cultural activities, but really a wide range of participation for voters across the state. The least frequently participated in activity on our list was visiting karaoke bars. We asked voters who frequently participated in each of these activities about how much they spent the last time that they did one of these things. And it's notable that this is trying to recall past behavior, and so we made sure to let voters know that an estimate of their spending was fine. And then we asked, after gathering that data, whether they thought that was typical of what they would usually spend on these types of activities, or if it was more or less than average. We find that most voters say that their spending estimate was pretty typical of their spending on these activities, and so we have those listed individually, but we tried to collapse them into a few numbers that were a little bit more digestible for category spending. So we find that overall, on average, voters spend about $183 when attending museums or other educational events, including conventions or conferences. When attending live performances, on average, voters are spending $170. And when attending public events such as festivals, cultural events or parades, or sporting events, we find that voters are spending about $130 on average. Diving into some sentiments about the coronavirus and how that colors voters' eagerness or hesitation to engage with the cultural sector of the economy, we find that 4 out of 5 voters statewide feel that they can currently protect themselves against the coronavirus. 68% feel comfortable participating in regular day-to-day activities, and 67% say that current health and safety protocols are effectively mitigating the risk of the virus. So again, a large majority here do see a light at the end of the tunnel and feel things are getting back to normal or that they're safe engaging in regular day-to-day activities. A little bit of color to this sentiment, we find that a majority of voters statewide are more concerned about the economic impacts of the coronavirus than the public health impacts, although it's not far from a 50-50 split. It's relatively close to a coin toss, but that is a statistically significant majority. And then when we look at the county level, that story is reversed. So in Salt Lake County, we find that a majority of voters are more concerned about the public health impacts than the economic impacts of the coronavirus. The last thing I'll note on this slide, we find that an overwhelming majority of voters feel that their social life was negatively impacted by the coronavirus, and nearly 2/3 say that the coronavirus had a negative impact on their mental health as well. Also worth noting that a majority of voters say that their financial well-being was not affected by the coronavirus. So some of this, I think, likely colors the attitudes around eagerness to re-engage with the cultural sector once that's fully open for business and available. Moving on, asking about just some activities that voters have participated in the last year or so. We find that the most frequent activities or most recently participated in activities are some of those more day-to-day things, shopping at a big box retailer, purchasing something from a local business, or going to a restaurant. All of these things are things that I think the state and local governments have done a really good job of encouraging consumers to engage safely in these sectors of the economy. When it comes to the entertainment or cultural sector, we find that 60% of voters haven't participated in these types of activities or visited these venues in more than a year. Only about 26% say that they've done so within the last 6 months. So again, shifting gears a little bit here and stepping away from survey data for a moment, looking at the impact of the coronavirus on the creative industry or on the cultural sector of Utah's economy, we find that more than 3,000 W-2 unemployment claims were filed as a result of COVID-19, and we lost about 22,000 independent contractor jobs. So certainly a large, significant toll on this sector of the economy. The leisure and hospitality industry reported a loss of over $70 million. This cultural industry reported a loss of over $76 million, and the ticket rollover liabilities totaled about $17.5 million. So one point that I think it's likely that our survey partners will make here is just the level of investment required to recover from such a devastating period of time. When we look at voters' level of comfort engaging in various economic activities, including visiting entertainment or cultural venues, we find that a majority say that they're currently very comfortable participating again in some of these day-to-day economic activities, whether that's shopping at a local business or attending a restaurant or dining in. But when we look at entertainment or cultural venues, a majority say they're currently comfortable. 62% statewide would be comfortable participating in these activities, but only 38% say very comfortable, which is a little bit of a decrease compared to some of those other activities. The next slide here, when we ask voters about their prospective behavior, so how open they are to participating in specific live entertainment and cultural activities now, and their anticipated comfort participating in these activities 3 months from now, we find an increase across the board for openness to participating in these activities and engaging with the cultural sector in 3 months. So going to a zoo, botanical garden, or aquarium, we already have half of voters who say that they would be comfortable participating in this activity. But again, that openness to participating increases when they think about 3 months from now. All of this is, of course, contingent on some of the environmental factors that we'll get to in a moment, but certainly it's nice to see the trends moving in a positive direction, seeing voters' comfort levels participating in the cultural sector increasing over time. Going to an outdoor play or concert, again, just shy of half currently would be comfortable participating in such an activity. But when we look at 3 months from now, we get over that halfway threshold. And going to a fireworks show, festival, or parade, 47%, again, just shy of half, but that comfort level increases to 53%, thinking about 3 months from now as well. When we ask those voters who say that they are currently uncomfortable visiting live entertainment or cultural venues in the state when they expect to be comfortable returning, we find that 3% say within the next month, which based on the fielding dates of the survey in March would mean that they would be comfortable now. So that 3% increase there pretty well reflected consistently throughout the survey data. 20% total say that they would be comfortable returning to these venues within the next 3 months. And then 53%, we reach that majority of voters who say that they expect to be comfortable participating in this sector of the economy within the next 6 months. 87% total would be comfortable sometime this year, and just 13% of voters who are currently uncomfortable participating in these activities or visiting these venues believe that it will take more than a year for them to feel comfortable and assured doing so. Thinking specifically about the environmental factors and safety measures that might make voters feel more comfortable engaging with this sector of the economy, we find that the most important conditions environmentally hinge on personal vaccination and widespread community vaccination. 65% of voters say that those things would make them much more likely to participate in the live entertainment and cultural sector. A significant decrease in coronavirus cases, promotions or deals from live and local entertainment venues are the next most likely factors to increase participation. So there is a little bit of, again, economic color to this. Certainly there's a sentiment that if the cultural sector is willing to make some concessions and make that a little more appetizing for voters, the demand is there and they would be more interested in or more likely to participate in those activities. A virtual participation option has the largest neutral or no impact category here. We are seeing a little bit of screen fatigue that is exhibited, I think, throughout the survey results. Those virtual options, while increasing accessibility is nice, aren't things that are likely to generate more interest than we currently have. Thinking about the specific factors or things that venues can do to increase voters' comfort levels, we find that regular sanitization of high-touch surfaces and outdoor events are the most popular or most frequently selected items that would make voters feel more comfortable engaging with the cultural sector. After that, we have limiting the number of participants or attendees allowed in the venue at once, requiring all staff to wear face masks, providing hand sanitizer in easily accessible locations, requiring all participants or attendees to wear face masks, maintaining social distancing requirements, and requiring daily symptoms checks for all staff. All of these things have a likely increase in comfort for a majority of the voters. Again, after that, we fall below that 50% effectiveness threshold. There is a little bit of consistency here between what venues and staff at venues can do and what venues might require of attendees. So once we fall below that 50% threshold, there's, again, a little bit of economic or individualism at play, certainly some political sentiments as well. At the bottom of the list here, though, again, looking at those large neutral categories, requiring cashless transactions and prohibiting the sale of concessions are likely to have no impact for a majority of voters. That's an interesting little bit of disconnect where we find that a majority of voters want to see face mask requirements in venues, but prohibiting concessions doesn't seem to play a role. So whether those things are inherently connected isn't something that seems to be a consideration in voters' minds. So thinking now ahead to a post-pandemic world, we asked voters what activities they're most excited to re-engage with, the things that they're most looking forward to getting back to. We find that festivals, cultural events, or parades were selected by 38% of respondents. Certainly that's something that we heard pretty loud and clear from municipal governments that residents really missed last year. So voters are eager to get back to those activities. Zoos, botanical gardens, or aquariums, and live sporting events are the next two most popular or most enthusiastic audiences. And then plays or other live theater performances, rock or popular band concerts, and fireworks shows sort of rounding out the top 5 there. We also find that, again, 1 in 5 voters expect to participate at higher levels post-COVID, 19% on average across this range of activities we asked about. And 30% of voters expect that they will spend more when participating in these activities post-pandemic. We took a quick look as well at some of the more frequent arts and culture patrons. I will note that the activities that we tested here and that we asked voters about are pretty wide-ranging. We cast a really broad audience for what a frequent arts and culture participant might look like. So we wound up with about 2/3 of our sample falling into that frequent culture participant category. So there are a lot of similarities with the results overall here, but some of the things that are worth noting, again, for those most frequent participating audiences, regular sanitization of high-touch surfaces and outdoor event options are those things that are most likely to increase voter comfort levels participating in these activities. The festivals and cultural events and parades are the most popular activity that voters are excited and that these audiences are excited to get back to. And that's about 10 percentage points more than just among the general voter audience. So those frequent arts and culture patrons really are missing some of those festivals and cultural events that were canceled over the past year. And then among those who say that they're currently uncomfortable, again, 56% anticipate feeling comfortable returning to these types of venues in the next 6 months. And with that, I will turn some time over to Crystal and Vicki to talk through additional considerations from these survey implications.
Thank you, Kyrene. So I'll talk just a little bit about how this data will affect how arts venues will make decisions going forward. So arts and culture is the venue operator for many of the major performing arts centers in the county. Our job is to provide arts presenters and patrons with a safe and healthy place to perform, watch performances, and view inspiring visual art. With this data, we know that many audience members are still cautious about engaging with the arts, but we also know that many feel optimistic about returning in the coming months, and there are things we can do to help audience members feel more comfortable. This includes ensuring we're keeping the venues clean and sanitized, wearing face coverings and screening for symptomatic patrons, working closely with health authorities and elected officials to ensure we're always following the best health and safety practices, and then providing more support to arts organizations to promote awareness of events that are taking place and health and safety measures associated with those events, especially those measures that we now know our audiences care the most about. The data shows that as we reactivate our arts and culture communities and revitalize the arts and culture economy, just as much as any other time throughout the pandemic, it is crucial for arts venues and presenters to place a strong emphasis on the measures we are taking to keep our audiences safe. I'll now turn it over to Crystal Young-Otterstrom from Utah Cultural Alliance.
Thank you, Matt. Again, my name is Crystal Young-Otterstrom, and I am the Executive Director of Utah Cultural Alliance, which is the industry association for arts, entertainment, culture, museums, film, and live events. We like to say that we are the industry that brings everything that makes Utah a wonderful place to live, work, and play, minus the mountains and deserts, although a lot of the work that we do as an industry is inspired by our beautiful landscape. We are so grateful to be partners on this survey with Utah Division of Arts and Museums, Utah Department of Heritage and Arts, and Salt Lake County Arts and Culture. haven't you missed the magic of this industry, the magic of live arts, culture, and entertainment? This state knows that magic, and as you saw in the survey results, misses that magic. A love for arts and culture is part of Utah's DNA. According to a study from the National Endowment for the Arts, Utah is #1 per capita for personally creating art, and #3 for attending live cultural happenings. And I think that data that National Endowment for the Arts found is reflected in the data of this survey, where 2/3 of attendance of the respondents are high frequent cultural attenders. So we want to remind you that despite the fact that this industry is hurting and is one of the most impacted industries of this time, and we are still in need of additional support, and Vicki is going to talk to some of that support that our industry needs. This industry is open for business and open safely statewide. And we want to remind you that you can utilize resources such as nowplayingutah.com to find everything to see and do across the state. This is a website that sees 4 million annual visitors. And this is also where you can go to find primary ticket seller websites so you can avoid being defrauded, which is something that we see far too often and is starting up again now that live events and culture are starting up again. So again, we want to thank our partners and thank you to elected officials and particularly the state legislature for the investments they have made in the past year to help this industry survive and for the investments that they will continue to make. And I welcome Vicki.
That sounded good, didn't it? On behalf of the Department of Heritage and Arts, we are so pleased to be part of this survey and analysis with our partners, Salt Lake County Arts and Culture and the Utah Cultural Alliance. In conclusion, this survey shows that Utahns love and miss arts, culture, and entertainment. Audience intent to return is improving with increased vaccinations and decreased case counts. However, in the current climate, Utahns are still not fully comfortable with returning to live events. We anticipate that in the following months, as vaccinations rise and cases decrease, audience who indicated they will be more likely to return in the next 3 months will return. We are grateful to state and local governments for their leadership and investment in Utah's cultural community. It's important to note that this industry still needs help from the private and public sector during this recovery. It will take 3 to 5 years for our industry to recover from the losses that we have incurred. We still need investment to be able to survive this economic downturn. We need help advertising that we are open and that audiences can safely attend our events and gatherings. So what can individuals do to support our creative industry? Renew your subscriptions to museums, dance, theater, and music organizations, and sooner rather than later if you can. Donate your time and money to support your favorite cultural entities, and your time is especially valuable. We need engaged and supportive board members on all of our arts and cultural boards. Visit museums and galleries. Purchase art by Utah artists, and you can visit galleries and museums both in person and online. Attend performing arts events. There will be many outdoor events coming up soon. Visit nowplayingutah.com to find out where and when. So thank you so much for joining us today and for your interest and support of our cultural industry. We will be taking questions, and Crystal's going to lead that process. Thank you so much.
All right. So before I open it up for questions, I just wanted to share that there's nothing quite like hearing from the cultural businesses who have been in the trenches. So for the members of the press here in person, as well as those online, we have a few people here available for individual interviews in addition to the 4 of us. So we also have Dr. Quinn Monson from Y2 Analytics here, Felicia Baca from Salt Lake City Arts Council is out here, Wendy Hassan from Cache Valley Center of the Arts up in Logan. Online, we have Sherry Jordan, who's a representative of Tuacahn and can speak to how they were able to work with Actors Equity Association about being granted a contract, and a few others as well. And then I will add the questions from online are being sent to us, and there is actually a 30-second delay. You probably have noticed that the slides are a little off from the presentation because we're aligning the slides with the 30-second delay to the YouTube. So we might have to pause a little bit as we get questions from those online. But for those in person, you can use this microphone right here and ask away. We can also do individual interviews too. Are there any questions online? I mean, I know we have the delay, but.
Using
Sure.
the camera at the same time.
Yeah, no problem.
What user group or what group would you say was most impacted by this? Is it the individual actors? Is it the individual performers? Is it the event venue owners? Who was hurt most?
Impacted economically from the pandemic. Yeah, so the same entities here today actually also collaborated together on a survey collecting data over time of how they were economically impacted. So that $76 million loss that we communicated earlier, the loss is definitely seen more heavily among businesses, but the jobs loss is definitely most heavily with those gig workers. So the 22,000 is the 1099 gig workers, individual artists, stagehands, et cetera, who have been furloughed or unemployed. We are lucky here in Utah that while we are hurting, the numbers show that we are hurting, we are not as bad off as other states. And that's thanks to the investment that our public officials have made in the past year. Last year, the state legislature invested $29.75 million. Our county governments, and do you know the total off the top of your head, Matt, that Salt Lake County did? Salt Lake County made a significant investment too. Would you guys like to add any comment?
I'd say in general, the live performing arts had to close down first, and they're going to be the last to open. They're going to have a longer ramp. So all of those individuals involved in that have been affected.
Can you guys survive that 3 to 4 year span? That's a long span before everything gets back up to 100%. Is that survivable?
Well, we are so fortunate that right now we have not lost, that I'm aware of, any of our cultural organizations. And we are determined, persistent, and diligent, and we will get through this, but it's not going to be easy.
How do you think you can inspire more confidence and boost the patrons, boost their confidence to come out sooner, to come out quicker? What can you do as a whole?
You guys want me to respond now?
Yeah, well, I think there's a number of things that we can do. I think encouraging people to be vaccinated, to work closely with health officials to make sure that we're following the best health and safety procedures. And I think that if we do that, it will help recover sooner. I think a big part of that is also promotion, following nowplayingutah.com, working with all the various arts organizations to increase promotion of things that are taking place. And then also providing options that audiences will be comfortable with. We know different audience members have different comfort levels with participating in arts and culture events. So that includes doing outdoor events, providing virtual options, and then placing a focus on the health and safety that is taking place at indoor venues as well as those start to reopen. So I think those are the things that we can do to make sure that we're encouraging audiences to participate safely and to start to reactivate those areas.
I hear your plea to the public and to industry to help support the arts right now. Do you fear that public money, government money has run out and maybe that portion of it has been tapped? I know it's kind of a hard question.
So far, the money has not run out. We've just received a grant from the National Endowment for the Arts to help with this. The state legislature funded $5 million that we are in the process of. Today actually is the deadline for the applications for that money to help with this industry. So I am confident that our elected leaders and government understand that this issue has been severely impacted, and they know that it's going to take a little longer. So I'm very confident that we will have the resources moving forward.
One last question.
Can I add one more to that?
Oh, please, absolutely.
Yeah, so we are working together collectively to work with the legislature with a special session coming up on May 19th to try to secure further investment for this industry. Yeah.
My family and I, we're patrons of the arts. Talk to me, talk to us, talk to those people out there and tell us why we need to come back.
I'm happy to take that. Any of you guys want to? You know, I might get emotional. For any of my fellow Ted Lasso fans out there, I like to paraphrase a character from there who runs around saying, "Soccer is life," but really, arts and culture is life, because this is the stories of our collective humanity. It's how we have processed trauma over time. It's how we've laughed together and entertained together over time. It's how we've remembered what our ancestors have done before us, how we interpret history in the past. And when I said before that there's a magic to this industry, we can talk about the quantitative value that this industry brings. Kyrene spoke to some of the economic impact from some of our prior studies. And all of that is important and is part of why we bring value to this state. But it's the magic, it's the stuff you can't quantify that I think is the real value. And it's always hard to communicate that, which isn't, expressible, which is also the business of this industry, to communicate the inexpressible. But when you take that away, we all missed it, right? We have all missed it. And on Monday, I was at Hale Center for the Arts. Doug, the super fan, was there. You guys may know him. There's been some stories about him in the past and on your various news outlets. And he wears a sweatshirt saying, "Actors, thank you for the memories, super fan." And it's those memories, it's those experiences.
Thank you.
Yeah, Kyrene's gonna bump.
Just one thing to add quickly, when Y2 Analytics conducts surveys statewide and for local municipalities with some frequency, and some of the things that are most correlated with high quality of life ratings are the arts and the culture and these opportunities to engage with our communities. And this is something that is, again, while this is a sector of the economy that has a solid quantifiable impact, there's a level of difficulty expressing how that really affects individuals' lives. But we do find that that arts and cultural sector and those community opportunities to engage are highly and significantly correlated with positive quality of life ratings throughout the state of Utah.
I'm going to ask a question, even though I'm available to answer questions. And it's not related to the data. I wondered if any of you could comment. I want to take a more optimistic tone in terms of a question and think about, are there any silver linings that come out of the whole pandemic experience with the arts? And I'm thinking of one in particular that I know of from my experience in the university setting, and that is what I've learned is that a lot of the performance opportunities that students were participated in were moved to a virtual setting. I heard you say something about virtual options, and one of the things that came out of that as a real positive is that it allowed a lot of parents to see their children perform from a large distance. So if you came to Utah from out of state and your parents aren't able to come visit and see your performance. There were parents that saw their kids perform for the very first time in the college setting because they had never been able to travel before. I wonder if there's a parallel to some of our professional settings in Utah, where there's opportunities for people in rural Utah, off the Wasatch Front, or in people who are immunocompromised that may not be comfortable coming back so quickly, for these virtual options to continue and allow a broader participation than we had before.
I think you've asked and answered your own question. It's so true. We have learned so much during the last 18 months, and we have some people in the audiences right here, Felicia, Wendy, Pam, who could share stories of how they have twirled and made a difference. I mean, we learned more about accessibility and how we could be more accessible through some virtual and some other means. And I think all of the groups that we work with figured out ways to connect, even though we weren't allowed to connect. And I think that's where we make a difference. We are all about connecting and relationship building. And we have learned so much. We could probably spend another hour going through all of the examples. But thank you for bringing that up, because there is always a silver lining, and we have found those linings and have used them as much as we can. You know, I think so. I think there's going to be some hybrids. Maybe there are some things that are just virtual, but we also have to recognize that not everybody in rural Utah or in the state, even in urban areas, have access to virtual. So that was an important lesson that we learned. So if nothing else, we learned about the discrepancies in resources. And that is at the top of our mind, and we want to make a difference there. So, thank you.
All right, there's a couple questions. Oh, Sean, okay. Then I'll get to the online question.
You talked about what supporters and what general public can do to help out. What do you using this data, what are you recommending arts groups do to act on this data?
As the industry association, we don't like to tell businesses how to do their businesses, but I think what businesses could grab from this data is a few things. First of all, with the higher comfort of outdoor still, working that into your maybe summer and fall offerings while the weather is good. It was interesting to see how sanitization was so highly prioritized over even mask wearing and distancing. And so really making sure that you're communicating what your sanitization and other hygiene practices are. I think they can also consider if spacing is best for their business model or not. That was important, but not the most important thing for consumers, but it is very different for different audiences. Some businesses in our industry, their audiences will expect distancing for a long time, whereas there are businesses in our industry who are already shoulder to shoulder, it's already allowed, and they're selling out. And so it really depends on who your consumer is as a business. I think the most important thing we would encourage all of the members of our businesses to do is to continue to serve and create and do in the ways that works for their businesses. Some have been entirely online through this pandemic and are going to continue to be online for a while, and some will be continuing to pursue that hybrid model. Did you guys add anything else? Okay, do you have any other questions, Sean, before I go to the online questions? All right. Okay, the first online question is asking the speakers to highlight a few upcoming events in May. Matt Castillo is going to talk about some events coming up in his facilities, the Salt Lake County's facilities, and I don't know if I want to put Wendy on the spot. Do you want to talk about Matilda, or you want me to mention it for you? Okay, come on up here. Alicia, you too? Come on up.
Great, I'm so glad you asked this question. So we've got a lot of great things coming up at Salt Lake County Arts and Culture venues. So here at the Rose Wagner Theater, we have the National Choreographic Festival with Ballet West opening here shortly in a week or two. We also have the Utah Opera is staging their spring opera, the La Tragédie du Carmen, at Capitol Theater. We have music of Andrew Lloyd Webber opening at Eccles Theater here next weekend, which is a wonderful program featuring Utah artists. And then we also have the Mid-Valley Performing Arts Center, which is opening on June 1st in Taylorsville. And so we're really excited to start putting on events in that part of the valley as well at that facility. And the last thing I'll mention really quickly before I turn it over to Wendy and Felicia, we've got Open Streets coming up here in downtown Salt Lake City with the Downtown Alliance, and there's a lot of great arts and culture programming being planned for that event as well. So we're really excited for that to take place throughout the summer and for people to be able to come outside and enjoy those events there. So Wendy, do you want to share some events?
You'll have to stop me. Cash Theater Company opens Matilda tonight in the Ellen Eccles Theater in Logan, Utah. We will be getting the music of Andrew Lloyd Webber after it goes to Salt Lake on the 21st and 22nd of May. Lyric Rep is planning summer performances, as is the Utah Festival Opera Company, which has about 4, I think, that they're planning to do. And we'll have free concerts in the Logan Tabernacle every Monday through Friday from Memorial Day to Labor Day.
Thank you. Matt mentioned Open Streets, which we're really excited about participating in a closure of Main Street with a variety of activities. Coming up for us, we're so excited about the Living Traditions Festival. We're one of the largest folk and traditional arts festivals in the West. And one of the things we're doing this year is spreading out to multiple locations. We're typically a 3-day festival kind of packed in there. We're spreading out, and one of the silver linings, of course, of this is geographic equity in our city, which is something that's always of interest to us. So that's a free event with over 30 cultural groups that do craft making. We'll have one culminating food event, and you can find out about that at saltlakearts.org. We also just launched in partnership with a variety of partners to highlight our shutter venues, the Brown Bag Concert Series, which focuses on local musicians in Salt Lake City. And that is a hybrid of live stream and events on Open Streets, so free also. We're really excited. We kicked off last night at the Capitol Theater and are doing some smaller venues such as Kilby Court and the State Room to highlight the challenges that they've had and really elevate our local musicians. And later in the summer, we've bumped a little bit to mitigate impacts, but you'll see a Twilight Concert Series from the Salt Lake City Arts Council later in August and September. Thanks.
And I'll add for Tuacahn Online down in St. George, they are opening Beauty and the Beast and Annie in May, and then School of Rock in Count of Monte Cristo in July. The Shakespeare Festival is opening this year. We're waiting to hear from a few other of our beloved festivals. The Moab Music Festival just put their summer schedule online as well for their September festival. So it's back. It's going to be back. And just a reminder, you can find events at nowplayingutah.com. I'm getting the Ogden Twilight series is also opening back up in addition to many of our beloved concert series across the state. So thank you. I think this is the last question online. And this says data shows support for outdoor events, but temporary mass gathering permits are not being issued yet. Can we work with state health officials to open temp mass gathering permits or a version of this permit? Does temporary outdoor infrastructure increase the risk of transmission greater than permanent outdoor infrastructure? And if any of my colleagues want to chime in, they're happy to, but I can speak to that a little bit. So as the industry association, it's kind of our job to interface with elected officials and advocate them for the needs of our industry. And I will say legislation passed during the recent legislative session does prevent local jurisdictions from doing restrictions more restrictive than the state guidelines. So essentially that kind of makes you have to be able to get a permit. However, once the end game metrics are met, it's actually a little bit different for this industry. The state guidelines do go away, but then it becomes the jurisdiction of the local health department, subject to the approval of the legislative body for that local health district, and it's a 30-day reauthorization. And so to the Spencer who asked that online, happy to work with you if you're working on with a specific jurisdiction, but it has been our experience that cities and counties across the state want to work with their cultural businesses and help them find things to do, and ways to be able to open, I guess is how I should phrase that. Do you want to speak to that at all, Matt? As part of government? No? Okay. Please. Okay. All right. I think, is there any last questions? Again, we're all available for individual interviews if you need any. And for those listening online, contact information for all of us available for individual interviews is in the press advisory, so you have that as well. And it looks like that's all the questions. So thank you so much for your time. Thank you to Y2 Analytics for doing such a wonderful job conducting this study and digesting all of this really important information for us. It's been so interesting. There have been a number of national studies on intent to return, and it's so interesting to see how different it is here in Utah, and then also different in our different regions within Utah. And thank you to our partners, Utah Department of Heritage and Arts, Utah Division of Arts and Museums, and Salt Lake County Arts and Culture. And thank you to our friends who came from far away. And thank you to all of you for covering this today. Have a great day. Get out and do some culture.